The Google Pixel 9 Pro was created for people who want a powerful camera packed into what they carry around every single day. The Fuji X-M5 was created for people who may be stuck using this and want to jump into the world of not only dedicated cameras, but also the Fuji ecosystem. Going into this comparison, I was curious if the X-M5 offered enough features and value to convince someone who uses something like this to switch over to the Fujifilm ecosystem. Take a look at this beach shot that I got and tell me if you can see a difference on which camera got which shot. I was using the kit lens with the Fujifilm X-M5 and the standard color profile. I was shooting in 4K 24 with both cameras and I exposed them exactly the same. My eyes first go to the sky and the water of camera B, which shows a less saturated sky, but a deeper and darker green in the water. Also, if you notice, there is less of a reflection on the water as well. I found this curious because I wasn't using polarizing filters on either camera. This means that camera A might be more sensitive to the polarized light than camera B. Here's another shot that I got that I could really see a difference. Camera A has a more saturated look, and you can also see a hue around each of those neon lights compared to camera B, which has a more crisp and clear image. Just like we saw on our last image, camera B seems to be in more control over the highlights because I can see more detail in the image, especially in this highlighted spot of the pinball machine. And then finally we head outside to the bright sunlight where I left both cameras in program auto exposure. I was using the Viltrox 13mm f1.4 on the X-M5 to give a similar focal length to the Pixel 9 Pro's 1x camera, and I'm not using any ND filters. We're just letting the program auto do its thing in both cameras. And you can see that the sky color is different by quite a bit. And look at the grass color on camera A, it seems to be a little bit washed out, whereas camera B's grass is much more rich and green and it has more of a realistic look to it. And this is what I was actually seeing with my own eyes when I was out in the field shooting. And through every single comparison, I noticed this to be the case. Camera B seemed to give me a more real-to-life look. So what are we to do with all of this information? And how does it pertain to you on deciding on which one you think is best for you? Well, that's what I hope this video answers for you today. I've provided free project files for both the Google Pixel 9 Pro and the Fujifilm X-M5, so you can download those images to your editors and play the footage as you follow along. I'll leave a link to those project files in the description. This video is not sponsored by Google, and it's not sponsored by Fuji. In fact, no one is sponsoring this video. But if you would like to support this channel by using the links in the description to purchase some of your gear, then that would be greatly appreciated. For now, I'm going to be showing you over 50 video and photography comparisons, and I'm going to talk you through all of my findings. I put both of these cameras through real world situations that you might find yourself in, like exposure transition, when you're vlogging from shade to sunlight, and low angles to get different perspectives. I did some photography. I shot in 4K 60, 4K 24. I use these cameras as an A-cam, B-cam setup if they were the only cameras that you had. I hoisted them up into the air to test out their autofocus. I did some backlighting shots. I did some green screen work. I took a look at their headshot capabilities. I also did some low light shooting and some night shots to see how much noise we could find in both of these cameras. I did a macro shot. I tested out their stabilization and I did a zoom test for the heck of it. All right. We're about to jump headfirst into a whirlwind of information, so get your pen and paper ready. Today, on the Film Alliance. Let's talk about the pricing of these two cameras and some of the budgetary considerations that you might want to think about while you're shopping for either of these cameras. The Pixel 9 Pro starts at $849 US, and that's with the 128GB version. You may want to purchase some extra accessories such as a protective case, a screen protector, which would put you closer to that $1,000 mark after taxes. And in comparison, the Fujifilm X-M5 body alone costs $799. If you want to add the kit lens, which is a 15 to 45 f3.5 to 5.6, that will cost you an extra $99. But you'll also need some extra accessories like an SD card, and I would pick up some extra batteries, which will bring you closer to that $1,000 mark. Although the Pixel 9 Pro and the X-M5 are similar in price for the out-the-door costs, they are very different. To start off, this camera has a GPS and you can text and call people. The Pixel 9 Pro also has a 48 megapixel sensor that can shoot in 4K up to 60 frames per second. It can also shoot in 8K up to 30 frames per second through its video boost mode, and it has a huge display for viewing your shots and your playback. The X-M5 has a 26 megapixel sensor that can shoot in 4K 4K up to 60 frames per second. But the sensor is much larger, coming in as an APS-C sensor. You can shoot in open gate 6K up to 30, and it can shoot in F-Log and has a fully articulating display, which is really nice when you are vlogging at arm's length or you hit some harder angles. It comes as an interchangeable lens camera. You can purchase extra lenses for this particular camera, and it has Fujifilm's film simulations, which are two of the biggest main differences between these two cameras. Both the Pixel 9 Pro and the Fuji X-M5 were released in the same year in 2024. So both cameras have all of the latest tech from this time period. If you recognized which camera was which in those initial shots at the start of this video, well done. I will keep incorporating comparisons and full screen shots throughout this entire video so that we can clearly illustrate the differences in image quality between both of these cameras in different lighting environments. The X-M5 is an entry-level camera, and it's designed to show people that there's more to video and photography than smartphones. But with that being said, both cameras are very capable. I'm just interested in how much they differentiate. If by the end of this video you're still undecided about which one of these two cameras you should purchase, I made 2 free quizzes on which camera or lens you should choose. The quiz will ask you specific questions, and based on your answers, it will funnel you to the camera or lens that best suits your needs. Let's talk about the lenses. The main lenses that I used on the X-M5 while I was out using it was the kit lens as an everyday lens. I used it as a macro shot lens, and the one that I used mostly. But I also used the Viltrox 23mm f1.4 as my low light shooter, and the Viltrox 13mm f1.4 for some of my landscapes. Now let's talk about their usability and design. I found that the Pixel 9 Pro is undeniably a more convenient and easy to use camera for beginners. You can just open this thing right out of the box and go out and start filming with it. However, accessing the more advanced features on the X-M5 requires a deeper dive into the settings and a bit of a learning curve. Mastering the X-M5's buttons and dials will require some time to figure it all out, but the resulting creative control that you get from that experience is going to be worth it. It took me a few days to get it to the point where I feel like I know where everything is now, and I'm coming from Sony, but if I was a straight beginner, the X-M5 would take more of a learning curve than the Pixel 9 Pro. When it comes to the grip of the Pixel 9 Pro, it's very easy to drop, so I highly recommend you pick up a smartphone case for it. And the X-M5 grip is not like what you get with other traditional mirrorless cameras. The grip is pretty thin, and it requires your finger and your thumb to grip onto it. And if you're using bigger lenses, you're gonna have to use your entire hand. But if you pick up a cage like this small rig cage, you'll see you're gonna get a lot better of a grip. The bottom of the Pixel 9 Pro has a charging port, a speaker, and a SIM tray. You can charge the Pixel 9 Pro through USB-C, and the USB-C can be used for transferring files and charging your phone. The X-M5 has several ports, a micro HDMI, a USB-C, a headphone port, and a mic port for external audio inputs. The mic port is located up here at the top of the body. The Pixel 9 Pro does not have an interchangeable battery. You have to charge the phone via USB-C like I had mentioned, and that's one of the most significant advantages with the X-M5 is you do have the ability to interchange batteries and memory cards. So this eliminates any anxiety of running out of power while you're out shooting or storage, because you can always bring extra batteries and extra SD cards. This way you can continuously shoot. Whereas if I run out of power or storage with the Google Pixel 9 Pro, that's about it for me. The Pixel 9 Pro's display is a lot bigger and more touch sensitive than the Fujifilm X-M5. But it can be frustrating if you're vlogging using the 1x camera because you will not be able to monitor your frame. And although the X-M5's display is smaller and the display is not as touch sensitive, it can fully articulate. So if you're a vlogger, then I would say probably go with the X-M5. And like I had already mentioned, the fully articulating display is not only good for vlogging, but it's also great when you're trying to capture low angle shots or hard to reach shots, and you can actually see what the camera is seeing. The Pixel 9 Pro has a white balance slider for video and a shutter speed slider for photos, but you don't have control over the aperture because it's fixed. The X-M5 offers a lot more customization and control when it comes to buttons and dials and exposure control. I noticed that the autofocus is more reliable on the Pixel 9 Pro, and that's because of its fixed aperture. So most everything is in focus already, unless we're shooting something close up. Whereas I noticed the X-M5 struggled to figure out what it was trying to focus on. The X-M5 features touch tracking autofocus, which does help with maintaining focus on moving subjects, but when I have the cameras hoisted up in the air like this, touch tracking doesn't really help. When it came to photography in certain situations, I didn't see that much of a difference in everyday use. Take a look at this shot that I got of the painted portrait, for example. Can you really see that much of a difference? I know I cannot. I see that there is a difference in the color science, but it's not to the point where I think one is better than the other. Same thing with this painted picture. You can really see the color science difference, but that doesn't necessarily mean one's better than another. Also, with this vintage computer shot, I kind of see the same thing. It doesn't look terribly different from each other as far as image quality goes, but there is a color science difference. And even when I'm outside and I had a lot of light to work with, I took this shot of the Jeep side by side. And again, I didn't see much of a difference when it came to image quality, just a difference in the colors. But when I shot this fountain, I felt like the Fuji gave more detail, and it looks like a real photograph rather than a reconstructed fake pixel photograph, if that makes any sense. And I was also able to see a big difference when it came to this sunrise shot. Look at how the pixel starts to really fall apart around all of those highlights where the sun is. Whereas the Fuji is able to maintain not only the highlights, but also the shadows. So if you prefer to shoot stills, then I would definitely go with the X-M5, especially in those tough lighting situations. When I did the green screen shots of this product, I found that I had more room to play with the keyer in Final Cut Pro with the X-M5. If I didn't light the green screen perfectly with the Pixel 9 Pro, I would have been struggling to make sure I'm keying out the product using the green screen. Whereas the X-M5, I could fluctuate a bit more in post-production. So if you plan on doing any type of green screen work, you could absolutely do it with the Pixel 9 Pro, but you'll have to invest in the proper lighting setup to make sure that your green screen is lit evenly. The Pixel 9 Pro does have macro focus, and for this macro shot, I wasn't able to get as close as I would like to with the X-M5 because the kit lens does not have that close of a minimum focus distance. And in this particular shot, I saw a lot more noise coming from the Pixel 9 Pro than I did the Fuji, which is what I expected because of its larger sensor. For this overhead shot, I was seeing that the X-M5 was really picking up on those overexposed skin tones on my hand, whereas the Pixel 9 Pro was able to even it all out a little bit better using its computational algorithms. With that being said, I think either one of these two cameras would be great overhead cameras, but you may need to use a softer light source if you're using the X-M5. I also found a very similar situation with the product shot here that I did with the green screen shot. I wouldn't be able to tell the difference between these two shots unless I was looking at the black on the handle. You can see that the black on the X-M5 is a little bit more realistic, whereas the Pixel 9 Pro's black is a little bit more washed out. Let's listen to their audio before we jump into their image quality. We're doing a vlog test right now with the Fuji X-M5, and we're gonna go from a shadowed area into a sunny area. I have the X-M5 set to program auto exposure so that it can adjust quickly. Now we're doing the same exact vlog test with the Google Pixel 9 Pro. We're listening to the audio, and we're also seeing how fast it adjusts from in a dark area to all of a sudden being in a bright area in program auto exposure. Please let me know in the comments which one you liked better when it came to audio. If you're interested in improving your video creation skills and learning more about cameras like these, make sure to join the Film Alliance by subscribing. I wanted to test out both of these cameras as if they were the only cameras someone could afford. So I put them up as an A-cam, B-cam setup to see how the skin tones would look. And when it came to skin tones, I would say the X-M5 does a better job. I see a lot more of a saturated look with the Pixel 9 Pro, and it also seems like it softens out the skin tones. So if you're a skin tone shooter, I would say go with the X-M5. When I look at this color checker, I look at how much darker the greens are and the different hues of the reds and the oranges. You can see that the black is a little bit more splotchy with the Pixel 9 Pro over the X-M5, and the X-M5 definitely has a truer to life color readout. For this sharpness test, I flipped the Google Pixel 9 Pro to its 1x camera, and then I scaled in 5000% so we could pixel peep and see which one of these two cameras was more sharp. And this was a testament to the Fuji's bigger sensor, because even though the Pixel 9 Pro has more megapixels, you can clearly see that when I switch back and forth between both of these images, the Fuji film comes out on top. The Fuji maintains a cleaner line in that little square. Look at all that mushy roll off you get between the lines on the Pixel 9 Pro. But let's not forget, most people people aren't going to do this. They're not going to scale in 5,000%, but it is a good test to see which one is sharper. And in this case, the X-M5 is. Although it looks like the Pixel 9 Pro has more dynamic range by looking at the rocks and seeing how much more lit they are compared to the dark rocks of the X-M5, the image is actually more realistic with the X-M5. The phone's dynamic range is almost like a fake dynamic range, and although the pictures look great and you can tell there's something different about it, it's not as realistic looking or cinematic looking as the X-M5. I always find that these types of shots are great ways to figure out which one has better dynamic range. Now granted, I'm not using F-Log with the Fuji for this shot. These are just straight at the camera, but still you can see that the Pixel 9 Pro seems to do a bit better when it comes to looking at the shadows. It's almost as if it pushes up the midtones in camera so that you don't have to do it in post-production. And it maintains a lot of that building color. And we can see a little bit more of the same thing here, whereas you get more color with the building with this backlit shot with the Google Pixel 9 Pro than that Mudu shadow look that you get with the X-M5. When I did this landscape shot, I didn't notice much of a difference at first, but like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, once I started to go back and forth, I could really see the grass color was changing. And speaking about sky color, here's another example where we can see a really big difference. I also shot this in 4K 60 so I could slow it down a bit and see how their 4K 60 looked while looking at the saturation of the sky. And when it comes to sky color, the X-M5 came out on top with a more realistic looking sky. One thing I sometimes forget to look at when I'm doing these comparisons is what the sun color looks like. And I think that that tells you a lot about not only the sensor, but also how the color reflects off of the glass. Now, this is gonna change depending on what lens you have on your X-M5, but it's gonna be about the same with the Pixel 9 Pro unless the glass deteriorates over time. For this particular shot, I was using the Viltrox 13mm f1.4, and I love the way that those diffraction spikes look around the sun. And the same principle plays out with low light shots, like this one right here. You can see a lot more of the figure's clothes and details with the Pixel 9 Pro, rather than that silhouette that you get with the X-M5. But in my opinion, I like the look of that silhouette rather than having midtones being pulled up and making the image a little bit more noisy with the Pixel 9 Pro. And the same thing here, you can see that the brick has more detail in it with the Pixel 9 Pro, and the sky is a little bit more saturated, and there's a larger difference between highlights and shadows between the X-M5 and the Pixel 9 Pro. And the Pixel 9 Pro's midtones get lifted a tad, which also brings more noise into the image. And one last example here of low light shots, look at the building and the fake dynamic range on the Pixel 9 Pro, and also look at the sky color. We're talking about two different performances when we put these cameras into low light shooting. I much prefer the X-M5 because the shadows are not as noisy and it looks more cinematic or movie-like than the Pixel 9 Pro. You can almost tell that the Pixel 9 Pro was shot on a smartphone. But the Pixel 9 Pro does have 8K video boost, and when I used that in night situations, I found that it performed a lot better in producing a higher image quality in the shadows. When I shoot in the normal video mode, we have a different situation. I'm still seeing a lift in those midtones like this restaurant shot, but the Pixel 9 Pro handles those lights on the brick a lot better than the X-M5. And for this street shot, I think what I finally figured out was that the white balance on the Pixel 9 Pro becomes a lot warmer at night. You can see that it has a blue cast to it, whereas the X-M5 is more cool. This is all in the white balance of both of these cameras. And when we go indoors, look at this arcade shot. Look at the hue around the neon lights. It has more of a natural halation effect. It's almost as if I'm using a diffusion filter on the Pixel 9 Pro, which I'm not, but rather give that halation effect to neon lights in night environments. I would rather have an option to turn it on and off, or maybe add a filter, rather than having it baked into all of my shots with the Pixel 9 Pro, although I do like the look of that shot. Also, both cameras are in their standard color profile. You can't change the profile for the Pixel 9 Pro when it comes to shooting video, and I left the X-M5 in its standard color profile. But look at how different the reds are in this shot of the arcade. That's mainly the biggest difference that I see between both of these cameras when we're shooting at night. But when we go outside in the daylight and I'm shooting this stadium shot, I switched both cameras over to 4K 24, and you can see that we're having a lot of that dynamic range thing happening again, where it looks like the Pixel 9 Pro outperforms the X-M5. But now we know that that's just a fake dynamic range. And with this 4K 60 shot, you can see again that the bricks are a little bit more dark, and the sky color is also different. And once you start to pick up on these little differences, you're really able to call out which one was shot on the phone and which one was shot on the dedicated camera. I wanted to see how both of these cameras would transition their exposure when we went from a shaded area to a sunlit area and we were shooting in their program auto exposures, like this vlog type shot. And you can see that the Pixel 9 Pro performed a lot better better than the X-M5. The X-M5 sort of took a little bit longer to transition between the shade and the sunlight. When it came to doing a headshot, what I had in mind was someone who didn't have money for an extra lighting kit. They had to sit in front of the window and use the free sunlight to hit their face, and then let's just see how both of these cameras perform. And with this headshot, I was impressed with both cameras. I could see that the Pixel 9 Pro's skin tones were a little bit off, but with that being said, I could use either of these cameras as my headshot camera if I was on an absolute budget. One significant advantage of the Pixel 9 Pro over the X-M5 is its stabilization system. The X-M5 stabilization is less effective and it can be more problematic if you're handheld shooting. Both cameras have digital or electronic stabilization, which could be problematic for low light or night shooters, but if we're shooting in regular daylight hours, the Pixel 9 Pro came out on top. It's clear to me that the Pixel 9 Pro and the X-M5 have their strengths and their weaknesses. The Pixel 9 Pro excels in portability and ease of use, making it ideal for everyday photography and casual video recording. It's got that 8K video boost and great stabilization, which make it a surprisingly capable tool for even serious content creators. On the other hand, the X-M5 offers a more traditional photographic or video experience with its tactile controls. It's got a bunch of buttons and dials. You can interchange the lenses. It even has the Fujifilm simulations like we mentioned. And while it requires a greater understanding of how to use the camera itself, it will provide more creative freedom in the long run. Because I'm at where I'm at in my content creation journey, I much prefer the X-M5 over the Google Pixel 9 Pro. But if I was just starting out, the Pixel 9 Pro would be a great beginner camera. Ultimately, the best choice depends on your individual needs and your priorities. Although the Pixel 9 Pro's camera is excellent, when I have this camera in my hands, I'm more motivated to go out and actually create. The X-M5 encourages me to slow down and observe my surroundings and produce more meaningful images and videos rather than just having this in my pocket and pulling it out to capture memory type shots. Choosing the right camera can be challenging, but carefully consider your shooting style, your budget, and your desired features. You can find the perfect tool that captures your creative vision for whatever it is that you're doing. You made it all the way to the end of this video, and I hope I answered all of your questions between these two cameras. Please let me know which one you like better and why. I'm Joe with the Film Alliance. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. One of the most asked questions that I receive is, which camera should I buy? I know that you want to make the right decision, and it's a big decision. You want to find the camera that best suits your needs and stays within your budget. Many of you know which camera might be for you, but you need some guidance pinpointing it and feeling confident in your decision. That's why I made this course. I want to put my camera experience and knowledge into a compact and easy to follow format. I jam-packed it with camera buying fundamentals that I guarantee you will carry through the rest of your camera journey. I base this entire course on all the things that I wish I had known or someone had told me when I first started out. From understanding different camera types and their features to matching them with your specific video and photography needs, this course covers it all. After finishing, I'm confident that you'll finally have clarity over every angle and aspect that you might consider when buying a camera. I'll guide you through my entire camera buying process, taking you 90% of the way there. That way you'll be well prepared to make your decision. This is essentially all the guidance that I would give my own brother if he asked me, "Hey Joe, which camera should I buy?" Now I'm going to share that insight with you.